been walking down this dirt road. I got rocks in both my shoes. Welcome to That Dirt Road Radio Show, where we honor music's past and discover music's present. I'm Howard Curry, and I'll be your host. All the while I'm thinking of you. In today's show, we feature guitarist, singer-songwriter Eddy Cotton, also known as Crucial Eddy Cotton. Ed's a longtime, well-established musician whose talents span a wide range of musical genres. His combination of poignant lyrics, potent guitar licks, musical versatility, and a vast catalog of songs have made him a favorite with fans. Though his past includes membership in and/or leading bands who have played punk rock, jazz, rock and roll, country, and old standards, his last few years have been dedicated primarily to singer-songwriter and Americana festivals. Ed is thought of to be among the best guitarists throughout the Southeast and is often sought after by artists to assist them with their projects. We had the pleasure of speaking with him by phone about his influences, songwriting process, and his latest record, Self-Inflicted Wounds. He had this to say about how he got the name Crucial Eddy.
Actually, that was my nickname back in 1984-85 when I lived over in Riverside at this house that became known as Disgraceland. And it was a couple of guys and me that worked at Coconuts Records. And it seemed like anytime bands were coming through town or any of our friends that were in bands were having gigs, that we'd always end up with musicians crashing at our house, and there were, some jam sessions and things like that. And this was mostly the punk scene, not really a singer-songwriter scene. But the whole time that was going on, I was, trying to write songs and doing a miserable job of it. Because I hadn't really developed enough, and the whole name came from a guy that we called Slippery Mark, and I said, man, there were 5 or 6 guys with nicknames that Mark had given them nicknames, and I said, why have you ever given me a nickname? And he said, you're Crucial. And from then on, he called me Crucial.
So here's Crucial Eddy Cotton with I-10 West.
Can't go north. There's a warrant for me in Georgia. I can't go south 'cause I might get recognized. I can't go east. I never learned to walk on water, but I've got enough gas to get past Chattahoochee tonight.
Ed's fascination with guitar came early. So let's hear what he had to say about his earliest experience with the instrument and how he got his own first guitar.
I remember the first time I got to plug one in. Prior to that, I'd pick up, my brother had a guitar, an acoustic, one of those old Stellas with the airbrush stripes and the action so high it was good for nothing but bottleneck slide. And I used to sit with it and a pair of scissors, have it on my lap and slide around on it when I was, probably 10 or 11, but I wasn't allowed to touch it. So that was only happened when there was nobody at home, because my parents knew I wasn't allowed to touch it, and my brother would have just killed me. But I bought my first guitar. I snuck around and bought it. I didn't tell my parents I was doing it, from the choir director. He's a church organist, I guess, or something like that, who was a guy that was also in a jazz band at the local high school. And I bought an old Yamaha classical from him for $35. And when I went to pick it up, he said, I can't give it to you. And I said, why? And he said, because your dad just gave me money for it, and I gave it to him. You're getting it for Christmas. This was in like August. So I didn't get it until Christmas.
That's an eternity, man.
It was horrid.
Oh, wow.
And I was afraid that they were going to find out that I had bought it myself. He gave me my money back, of course, and I was afraid they were going to find out that I bought it myself. And, you know, it was just one of those things.
Ed in part attributes his abilities on guitar to studying the works of some of his favorite musicians.
You know, I would pick somebody and I would just study them. That's how that worked. And so the early people that I just sat down and studied, I didn't spend a lot of time on rock stuff. I really studied Brian May from Queen, but it wasn't the whole time that was going on that you know, Queen, I was trying to learn to play like him. I was also trying to learn bottleneck slide like Robert Johnson and Muddy Waters, and you know, beginning finger-style stuff, Blind Willie McTell. I mean, I worked on Statesboro Blues by Blind Willie McTell for probably a year and a half. But the first person I remember really sitting down and just studying the snot out of was Dire Straits, Martin Knopfler. That first album, I put it on and played along with it and played along with it and played along with it till I just about knew every note of that album.
Next, he talks about one of his lesser-known musical mentors.
I mean, one of my favorite times was I was playing with a guy named Stratford Hill, who was, I believe he's probably already passed away. He was an older African-American gentleman who showed up at a gig one night, a jam session, and we started talking. I told him about my band. He started coming out and sitting in with the band, but his wife wouldn't let him play a whole night because he was alcoholic, I guess, or something. I don't know. But for some reason, anyway, she would sit outside, and then she would come in and tell him when it was time to go. And she'd sit in the car. And I you know, would ask her, you know, would you like to come in? No, I don't get on place to serve alcohol. But I did go get her food and take it out to the car, you know, sometimes and stuff like that. And I'd stand out there and talk to her because, I felt bad that, you know, and she was okay with him going in and playing. She said, you know, he's just got to do it. There's no way around it. He's got to do it. But I don't want him to get back in that lifestyle of drinking and all that. And so he never did, you know, but we were playing one night and I was really just beginning to start to play leads on jazz tunes, and he said, "Go ahead," you know. On this, and I remember distinctly that it was summertime, which now, you know, I mean, I can look back and go, it's just a minor blues, you know. Well, back then I didn't know what a minor blues was. It was just something alien to me, even though I knew standard 12-bar major blues. Trying to improvise in a minor key was something I, you know, practiced that, but I didn't feel good about it. And he said, talk to him. And I started playing a little bit, and I just tried to play the melody and put a little emphasis on the parts I wanted to emphasize. And he put his hand on my shoulder, and he leaned over and whispered, "Now you're talking."
He had this to say about the process and his approach to songwriting.
I have several processes that I go, I work on. I'm learning to be a little more practical about it. The first few songs I wrote, you know, sort of came to me, and there wasn't a lot of editing or anything. It was like, oh, you know, but those are also ones that are generally pretty derivative. So when I'm trying to be less derivative and be more from my own heart and my own style, my own abilities, usually I'll come up with a phrase and I'll write it down. And a lot of times, if there's any kind of notes to go with that, you know, if I happen to be sitting on my front porch while it's raining, sometimes I'll add that to it, you know, just so that I have a reference. And I may not come back to it for, you know, sometimes it's a year. Most of the time it's not. Sometimes I'll get a full verse. Sometimes I'll get 2 or 3 verses. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of consistency to it. But one thing I have found is that if I don't push myself to write things down, they disappear. And if I do push myself to write things down, I will go back and look at them.
Songwriting is very personal to Ed, and he knows what he wants.
What I want to do when I write is put a picture in someone's mind. You know, there are songs you listen to where, you know, with Robert Earl Keen, where, you know, Charlotte and I have talked about this, you know, you could, what color is the door on the front of the house? It's red. Yeah, it is. He doesn't ever say that. Well, you know, how does that happen? You know, that 2 people will get the same idea. Is it because we live together? Well, maybe so. But, you know, I want to paint that broadly, that people can fill in the details themselves, but that there's some kind of consistency to the details they fill in, if that makes sense. And if I can ever do that with a song, then I will, you know, pretty much consider myself a genius, because I don't expect I ever will.
New Orleans got herself a reputation for separating money from fools. And you can get yourself a free education and never set foot in a school. Fell off the boat with your first month's wages, ready to shake your blues. When a man walks up and bet you $5, I can tell you where you got your shoes. New Orleans got herself a reputation of separating money from fools. And you can get into a sticky situation if you don't follow the rules.
Self-Inflicted Wounds is the title of his latest record. Next, Ed tells us how it came to be.
I was kind of in a rut and in between some job changes and things like that, because I had left, you know, playing music full time, and I was not happy with what I was doing, and I had no business feeling sorry for myself because, you know, I have a great life and beautiful wife and get to do a lot of cool things, and my kids are all healthy and good, and you know, I have all these blessings, and yet I felt like crap. And I realized, well, I'm not writing. And why am I not writing? Well, it's usually because I come home at night and I turn on the TV and I drink a couple of beers and then I go to bed. Whereas if I was, you know, to go sit in my camper where there's no television and have my guitar there, I would probably work on it. So I kind of used it as a surrogate office and went over and started having a really productive writing time. And so since then, some other things have changed, and I find myself having, you know, a lunch hour every day where I can sit and actually work on this kind of stuff. So since I've done this, I've almost got a whole nother album written.
After thousands of gigs, there's still those special moments when he reaches a crowd that he loves most about playing to live audiences.
I used to love playing live, and now it's funny because I have had a few moments where it was just right and it felt good again. I had those moments a lot and I can't complain because I had a lot more of them than most musicians will ever have, you know, because I was playing 6 nights a week and my band was really good and I was young and I was enjoying playing. And I was playing with guys that were so much better than me that if I was paying attention, I would learn something every single night. And if I wasn't careful, every other song. Now that joy is not there as much. I do it to see the people light up, you know, and I do it because I just can't help it. I have to get out there and play that stuff, or it drives me crazy. But you know, I've had, like I sang the Ballad of Sam Cotton a few years back at the folk festival, and I've only performed that thing, I guess, 2 or 3 times. And the first time I did was at the folk festival, and it was just a moment. You know, all the kids were sitting there, and all my, you know, Reverend Jerry was there, and you know, all the folk festival people, and people were in tears. And Landon Walker was playing the bass, and I looked over at him, and I said, "People are crying." He goes, "I'm about to cry." I said, wow. You know, I haven't had a moment like this in a long time. It's really a great thing, you know, to have a chance to, you know, and the best part was this guy named Fred Glennon, who runs sound there and MCs on the stages, and he came up to me and he said, "I never met your father, but I feel like I know him." And I said, "That's exactly why I wrote that song."
I can still hear him singing in high tenor when the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. And I can still recall when the preacher used to call on him to lead the congregation in prayer. And I remember him taking up the offering as the choir sang a Broadman hymnal tune. He'd sit down when they were done, put his arms around my mom, something the other deacons wouldn't do. We knew the people holding signs as we crossed the picket lines, the day they started busing kids to school. Dad looked our preacher in the eye, he stepped back and let us by. That's the way I learned the golden rule. I can still see him at the counter of the Steak and Shake, black coffee, a cheeseburger, and beans. Short sleeve shirt and birthday tie, point, say, look, and snitch my fries and tell me, use your napkin, not your jeans.
We'd like to thank Ed for coming on the show. He's already working on a new project, and we look forward to his next record. You can learn more about Ed and his music by checking him out on Reverb Nation and Facebook. We hope you'll join us next time. Until then, see you down that dirt road.
Still walking down this dirt road